Recorded via a lousy Skype connection in Orlando and Orange County, it's After Schmoe, the official Schmoes Know After Show. I'm Ken Apsock, and apparently I'm contractually obligated to introduce your After Schmoe hosts, Mr. Brian Davids and Aaron Turner.
Welcome to After Schmoe, the official Schmoes Know After Show. I'm your host, Brian Davids, and I'm once again joined by Aaron Turner. This is the show where we discuss all things Schmoes Know, including the Schmoes Know Show and the Movie Trivia Schmoedown. And for good measure, we'll even talk a little Collider video. Well, Aaron, let's get things started with a question I ask every single week. How does it feel to be on the number one show on the SK Podcast channel, as well as the Schmo Plus channel for a few hours, and now the number one show on the SK Plus channel?
Feels pretty good. The best part about recording this show is I can do it in my underpants, so I'm very comfortable.
That's right, you guys record the number two show on the SK Plus channel via Google Hangouts.
Correct.
In case you guys haven't noticed, the SK Podcast channel is now known as SK Plus. Both channels, including Schmoes Know, were rebranded last week. They've got new logos. I think everything looks great.
I'm a big fan of it. We've got a lot of big things coming. Cobster, that guy is an absolute visionary. He's got big plans for this channel in the future.
Despite being the number one show on the channel, I was amused by the fact that they put our logo on the same level as all the other shows.
Are you offended that Beardo was before you?
Well, I think the decision was made to not offend him. After all, we're in a society now where everybody gets a trophy, not just the winners of an ASO soccer league or a Pee Wee football league. And given all of the complaints that Kristian has received from parents, spouses, and fiancés, I'm surprised he hasn't had to give a belt to everybody in the Schmoedown.
Unbelievable. And by you, I meant us. I don't know why I said you. That was weird.
It must have been a Freudian slip because you're so used to being the number two show on the SK Plus channel.
Must have been.
Well, Aaron, let's kick things off with Collider Corner. That's a working title. Our recording schedule changed this week, so typically we would save this for the end of the show, but we had Michael Rapaport Monday. That's our first item on this week's Collider Corner. Do you enjoy Michael Rapaport's visits?
I enjoyed it this time. I thought this was the best that Michael Rapaport had ever been. You know, he had his line about not messing with the Power Rangers. I'll just leave it there because it's a family show.
I told you the first time I came on, I don't fuck with Star Wars.
Power Rangers.
I don't fuck with Power Rangers. I don't fuck with any of that shit.
You know, sometimes he gets a little bit out of line for my taste, a little loud, and that's fine. That's his deal. But this time, I felt like he gave some really good insight, and I was really into him.
This episode, Rapaport proved to me that he knows what he's talking about. He commented on how great that Affleck and Williams sidewalk scene was in Manchester by the Sea, and he speculated that the emotion reached in that scene meant that they must have shot it in just a few takes. Well, Affleck confirmed on another show that it was, in fact, shot in 3 takes or less. So Rapaport called it exactly, and interestingly enough, they look like they're freezing in that scene. However, it wasn't even that cold, apparently. So on top of reaching that level of emotion, they also had to sell the idea of being freezing cold in 55-degree weather, as if that scene wasn't hard enough.
It feels like Manchester by the Sea kind of got swept under the rug at the Oscars because it was so prominent in the early going. But yeah, that scene is incredible.
I think you swept Manchester under the rug because you picked Denzel on this very show, while I picked Casey. Of course, they also won for original screenplay. So for those scoring at home, I picked 7 out of the 8 big categories correct. Of course, both of us had La La Land, and I'm not sure we want to get too far down that rabbit hole.
I saw Best Picture, I saw them announce it, and I heard La La Land, so I immediately was like, okay, great, it's late, I'm going to bed, so I just turned it off. I got up the next morning, I was going through my RSS feed of news, and sure enough, it was like, no, Moonlight won. It's like, what is going on? So I had to go back and watch the video, and it's incredible how that came about.
Yeah, I joked on Twitter, when did Kristian Harloff start directing the Oscars? This was something straight out of the WWE. However, I think it's too crazy for anyone to potentially script, so I don't buy the idea of this being fixed, as it's too embarrassing for everyone involved. This is supposed to be one of the most prestigious events in the world, and I can't accept the idea that somebody designed this to happen. I have just one question, though. Is head of the class Perry Nemiroff going to serve as the third judge in next year's Oscars on behalf of PricewaterhouseCoopers?
Unbelievable.
Well, back to Michael Rapaport Monday. He made a great point that I have been waiting for someone to make. Despite having access to screenplays, the Academy is not required to read all of the screenplay nominations. Again, Rapaport made a point that I've been waiting for someone to make for quite some time, as you cannot evaluate the quality of a script per the finished product, the film. Yes, there are elements from the script that make their way onto the screen. However, there are also plenty of elements that the director added, as well as the performers, editors, etc. As Rapaport implied, there are more amazing scripts than there are amazing films. So unless you've read each script, you cannot say with certainty or preference that Hell or High Water was a better script than Manchester by the Sea just because you like the dialogue of one more than the other. Plenty of great directors have turned mediocre scripts into great films that end up being nominated for their screenplay. Conversely, plenty of great scripts have been turned into bad films that get zero recognition for their screenplay. So everyone in the YouTube movie space, myself included, has to pull back a bit on their script evaluations.
It's a very, very good point. I didn't know how the Oscar voting worked until I saw Crash Course, so thank you for that, Collider.
I happen to know a bunch of writers in both TV and film, partially because I grew up in Orange County, and for the fact that I have another podcast where I interview a bunch of them. So I've discussed this topic quite a bit, and it absolutely drives them crazy whenever they hear people judge a script from what they see on screen. Also, I've got another rant that I've been sitting on for quite a while, so bear with me. This whole Christian Bale, Viola Davis, supporting character, lead character argument is driving me nuts. I know I just referenced the same writer friends of mine, but they vote in supporting character categories every year for a variety of different award shows, so they know what the considerations are. And in the case of Christian Bale, he won the Academy Award for Best Actor in a supporting role. And by definition, supporting role pertains to the story itself, as Bale's role was to support the lead character, the main character of Mickey Ward, both literally and figuratively, as he played his half-brother and boxing trainer. Supporting characters are on movie posters all the time, so arguing against Bale because he's on the fighter's poster means very little, especially when you're ignoring the title on the poster which says The Fighter, not the fighter and his half-brother/trainer. So screen time is not the determining factor like the assumption continues to be. There's a reason the phrase supporting role is used per the official name of the award, as you can be on screen 90% of the film and still play a supporting role in someone else's story, just like Christian Bale did. And I could give you another huge rant about why Christian Bale deserved to win the Oscar in 2011, not Campy's preference of Andrew Garfield, but I can feel some tightness around my throat. Darth Minor Harloff must be in our live stream. Well, moving to Wednesday's eventful movie talk, we learned what chocolate preferences Ashley has, and Campea basically solicited a bunch of packages to show up at that studio, so don't be surprised if that happens. We also learned what Sinead prefers, as well as what Perry prefers.
Yeah, I'm not touching that comment with a 10-foot pole.
But let's not bury the lead. Campea teased a big Nightmares announcement. We knew one was coming once they ran out of February shows. Did you think it was done for?
I thought it was done. When, you get Kristian, the director of development.
Well, actually, it's the head of development.
And you have John there, and then Clarke. Everybody, it seemed kind of somber when they first started talking. So I was like, oh man, this is it. But we're going to get Nightmares. We're going to get it once a month. And it's going to be, I'm assuming it's going to be longer than an hour. I would assume that. Because they're going to have to jam a lot of stuff into that one show. So to have it there still is great. I love that. I'm glad it's not gone. I have no complaints. And thank you for letting it stay.
Yeah, we got the announcement. It wasn't the announcement that we were all expecting. I think a lot of us expected it to get canceled once we saw that they took it off the front page of the Collider Video YouTube page. And they're moving to a monthly release schedule, like you said, and this is certainly better than nothing. However, I'm still annoyed by the idea that this happened right before they could revel in the discussion that relates to the number one reviewed movie of the year, the number one movie at this past weekend's box office. Of course, that's Get Out. I'm annoyed that this happened right before they could enjoy the fruits of Kong Skull Island, which is released next week. They've been working up to all these movies for all this time, and now they can't enjoy the added traffic and interest that these bigger films bring, a la Rogue One, a la Civil War, a la Logan, Deadpool, etc.
Do you think it's possibly another litmus test for a month to see like what happens when we do it monthly? If it drives up a bunch of numbers, maybe it goes back to a bi-weekly format and then we'll see from there? Or do you think they're just going to stick with the month for now?
I do think they'll stick with a monthly show for a while, and they'll cherry pick the biggest news items as well as discussion of the biggest genre films or shows that have dropped since their last episode. Perhaps they can garner more viewers that way versus some weeks where they're discussing something super sweaty that may not interest the average genre fan. But I do think they'll work their way backward from a monthly show to a bi-monthly show, then to a weekly show. But yeah, my big concern is that they still push the idea of having guests. That concerns me because if we only get one show a month with this great panel, the best panel right now, in my opinion, I want to spend that time with the panel. I don't want a guest interrupting that panel because we get so little time with that panel now. Granted, I love shows that have great guests, but I want my time with that panel. So I hope to God that the episode is longer than usual, and I hope they put the interviews separate from the main show. I hope they do a half-hour interview with those guests and then do the main show with the main panel and give us a good 75-minute show or so.
That's what I was going to ask you, because I was wondering if they were going to start sprinkling interviews outside of Nightmares. Like maybe Clarke would do an interview with Jordan Peele, and that wouldn't have anything to do with the episode. It would just be a separate interview, and so on and so forth. Not necessarily around the time that Nightmares airs, just if something big in genre comes up and they have a big guest, interview them and they put it separately on the channel. I think that would be cool.
Yeah, it's rare that a guest is available around the time your show typically records, so it'd be a shame to miss out on someone like a Jordan Peele because the monthly episode isn't happening for a while. And let me be clear, I know guests are valued by Clarke and company in effort to grow their show. I just want to have my cake and eat it too while we're at one episode per month, so hopefully they can still take on guests whenever they're available. And if you can air those interviews in advance, it's good promotion for the upcoming monthly episode of Nightmares. I did think it was a bit strange that they didn't have their monthly episode this week to celebrate Get Out. However, it's obvious they're saving themselves for post-Kong Skull Island so they can reap those genre tentpole rewards. But by stroke of luck, we just so happen to have Clarke on this week's Friday Schmoedown, so I'm sure one thing had nothing to do with the other. But make no mistake, we're grateful to Complider, including Fernandez, Campia, and Harloff. They let us have one episode per month. We're going to make the most of it, and hopefully cherry-picking the best stories each month will bring some more casual fans into the mix. But let's get down to brass tacks. I'm not going to take sole credit for saving Nightmares. I mean, I would never take credit for something like that. But I do feel that this show played a key role as my interview with Clarke was uploaded before their highest rated episode in February, as well as their best 7-day output in months. So when I say you're welcome for the ratings, per the show's slogan, I'm not lying.
And we were in the chat room every time that the show's been live. You and I have been in there pumping the show. So there we are again.
We led by example, and boy, I can't tell you how many comments I read that said, man, I didn't know they covered more than just horror, or man, I didn't know I was supposed to click the like button.
You're like the Pied Piper of Collider Video. Everybody just follows your lead.
Well, I don't deal in promises. I deal in facts, and facts are stubborn things. Aaron, did you get a chance to check out your new friend DJ Wooldridge on Heroes?
I did get a chance to check out DJ, a much bigger sample size from him this week, as opposed to him on the live show. He was a good panelist. He brought in a lot of different insight. He pumped his own comic that he did on the live show as well about a zombie outbreak and zombie dinosaurs, which sounded really interesting. I have a feeling that we're going to see a lot more of him in the coming weeks on Heroes and other things.
This seems to be the Emma Fyffe path, because as soon as she debuted on Schmoes, she popped up on TV Talk the very next week. So it seems like this is the path that people start on when they join this crew. They start off on Schmoes, they do well on Schmoes, then they get a chance to be on a genre show. So I too think we will see more of DJ Don't Call Me Orlando Wooldridge.
Before you know it, he'll be guest starring on Awesome-tacular.
Well, thank you for reminding me about Awesome-tacular, as a mighty big coincidence took place this week, but more on that later. Well, we got to jump back to Thursday's movie talk, because we had Mark Ellis, Mark Riley, and Perry, another Mark sandwich, if you will, even though Perry avoided sitting in between them like last time. Riley dropped a Coming to America reference on this episode, so clearly he's been following my lead from this show, as I've been making a bunch of Coming to America references lately.
Will you just taste the soup?
Once again, After Schmoe is everywhere.
Aha!
And speaking of Coming to America, how about Logan bringing Coming to America full circle?
It's the trendsetter.
And speaking of Logan, the trends of James Mangold did not make their way to Thursday Movie Talk, as Natasha is still saying James Mangold. Now, Aaron, did you read into the fact that Mark Ellis said your current teammate, classy Clarke Wolfe, when Ellis was addressing a point to Riley?
I did not read into that, but now that you've said it, it makes me want to read into it. And after the events of the Schmoedown, which we'll get to later, it only makes that much more interesting that he said that.
Aaron, would you ever pair a taco with a cup of coffee?
No, I would not. My wife pairs odd things anyway. She eats sushi and drinks chocolate milk at the same time. It's absolutely disgusting. No. With a taco, it's tequila. I like Natasha's thinking.
It's not only disgusting, it's offensive to the artist who sculpted a beautiful piece of sushi for your wife to consume.
I know. It's ridiculous. How dare she?
Speaking of something offensive, somebody referred to Ashley's shoulder shimmy as a shoulder shake. So I would like this corrected moving forward. It's a shoulder shimmy. Well, then on Friday's Movie Talk with Dennis, Perry, Roca, and Ellis, Roca took a burb shot at Dan Merle. So the trash talk has continued. And Aaron, now that we have 3 less nightmares per month, don't you think it makes sense to have Clarke Wolfe hosting Friday Movie Talks to make up for those 3 missing shows? And look, I mean, no disrespect to Dennis. He's hosted Friday Movie Talks forever, but his career is ultimately in production. We have to keep Clarke on the channel as often as possible.
Are you trying to say that you don't want any more Dennis on the mic? Is that what you're saying?
For me, I just feel like the show would be best utilized with Perry and Clarke, because we have 3 less shows with Perry and Clarke now, especially Clarke, who is no longer hosting 3 episodes per month via Nightmares.
But with Dennis, they have a lot of fun.
I can't argue with that.
I think that it's hard to get people into the office on Fridays if they don't have to already be there. So that could be part of the problem. And maybe Dennis just likes to book in the week hosting. I'm not sure. Would I like to see Clarke or Perry there? Absolutely. But like I said, maybe hard to get people in the office.
I mean, Clarke was already there for her match with JTE.
Uh-oh. Inception.
Well, Aaron, there was a special video that dropped for the March Madness bracket involving the greatest movie villains. I didn't get a chance to watch this, but I take it you did.
I did watch it. It was basically your seeding show that you would see with college basketball, and they basically went over every single match. It was Campia, Kristian, and Mark, and they went over every single match and kind of gave a little bit of insight. Though it was kind of confusing because I'm not sure how to vote. Ellis was coming at it from a perspective of who would win in a fight. Kristian was coming at it from a perspective of what's the better film. So I'm kind of confused on which way to go. I'm personally going to go with how they would fight against each other. I think that's much more interesting to what's the better film, because that's kind of not fair. But overall, I thought the special was actually pretty cool. It gave some really good insight. I did have a problem with some of the combatants. I know there were 64, and you're kind of spreading it a little thin. But the fact that there was, I believe, 4 different characters from Quentin Tarantino movies, yet only one John Carpenter character, is crazy. You have Michael Myers, or The Shape, from Halloween, but you don't have The Thing from The Thing, which is one of the most iconic villains of all time. And you don't have Lo Pan from Big Trouble in Little China.
This is why we had to save Nightmares.
That's 2 glaring omissions right there. I also felt that the female contingent was a little underrepresented. I thought you could have put in Catherine Trammell from Basic Instinct, among others. So I felt that was kind of a little bit out of whack there. Regina George is in a no-win situation against Darth Vader, as she should not be. Have you seen the bracket, Brian, and what do you think?
I haven't had time as I've been making this show.
I will tell you, as you predicted last week, I believe, you said it would come down to Darth Vader and the Joker from The Dark Knight, and I am happy to report, you'll enjoy this, that they are on opposite sides of the bracket, which means that the only way they can face each other is in the finals.
Yeah, I hate to rain on their parade, but I just know where this is going.
You're exactly right. I think you're exactly right. That's how it's going to end up. You have probably the Joker coming out of the Rogues bracket, Darth Vader out of the Empire bracket, and the other ones are kind of a toss-up. There's some pretty good combatants in there, but I think it's a Darth Vader-Joker matchup for sure. I think you're dead on with that. I think a lot of people are probably voting that way as well.
I must admit, I love hearing you say how exactly right I am and was, but let me know how it goes.
Oh, I will. I absolutely will.
Moving to some other notes, I just want to pass along this message to John Campia. John, I'm waiting for your annual Armand White rant. This is the film critic who gave Get Out its 1 negative review. Armand White is known for these sorts of things. John has gone off on him many times before, and I'm looking forward to the next time. And there was some bizarre back and forth tweets this week between John Campia's executive assistant, Grace Don't Call Me Randolph Hancock, and Darth Minor Harloff, as they were mutually admiring each other with "you're the greatest," "you're the nicest," "you're the most gorgeous" type adjectives in such tweets. This clearly relates to the fact that Kristian forgot about Grace when shown a picture of her as a baby during the behind the scenes and bloopers baby pictures episode, despite Grace being the only redhead in the office. This also relates to comments of mine where I said that Grace Hancock deserves a proper introduction on camera so her behind the scenes appearances become even more meaningful. Many people don't know who she is, despite showing up on screen with her dog Rat in a recent Schmoedown and now the behind the scenes show. By commenting about this, I was also angling for an Arrival spoof video where Grace walks up to the Collider News Studio B glass window and holds her hand up to it, a la Louise Banks in Arrival, before John Schnepp throws himself up against the glass like a sweaty heptapod. So that would be a proper introduction for someone who pops up in behind-the-scenes videos, but hasn't been given a proper introduction in front of the camera yet. So back to the original topic of Kristian and Grace's Twitter exchanges, I think these are meant to introduce her, like I've suggested, while creating a new conspiracy for certain fans to chase. And then I saw this week's Awesome-tacular. Now keep in mind, I pitched Grace getting a proper introduction via an Arrival Louise Banks spoof several weeks ago. And guess what? Grace got her proper introduction on this week's Awesome-tacular, only it wasn't as the redheaded Louise Banks in Arrival, it was as the redheaded Mia in a La La Land spoof. Now, some of you might be saying, Brian, they probably never saw your YouTube comments about Grace getting a proper introduction. And that's where I'd reply, au contraire. Collider's account replied to that very comment. Furthermore, this week's behind the scenes and bloopers episode addressed a topic I pitched in that very same YouTube comment, office pet peeves. So I'm not going to say that I inspired this week's awesome-tacular spoof involving Grace Hancock, even if one of its writers referenced Coming to America within days of me doing it on this very show. But it is quite the coincidence after making a very similar suggestion involving Grace Hancock and Arrival. Well, shifting to TV talk, we had a very unique panel this week as Perry and Rocha joined Josh and Sinead. Apparently, David Griffin was in Aaron Turner country.
It was a nice change of pace. I always like seeing Perry pop up. We talked about that many times. It was a nice change of pace. Though David Griffin did not call me when he was down here golfing in Orlando, and I'm a little bit offended.
Are you going to Ellis' stand-up show during Celebration?
Oh, I got backstage passes, so yeah, of course.
I'm sure you'll be shooting a Ryan Snelling-like video where you ask Ellis if you're finally considered to be a schmo.
Yeah, something like that. We've pretty much got that planned. Ellis does owe me a Coors Light, as I owe him one as well, so that's probably going to be the extent of our exchange.
Well, let's move to the Movie Trivia Schmoedown as Team IGN squared off against Team Nerdist. Team Nerdist consists of Dan, the Mayor Casey, and Rachel Hine, while Team IGN consists of Eric Goldman and Jim Vavida.
That's correct. No Jessica Chobot this time.
I wonder what's up with that.
I believe the first time Nerdist was on versus the Schmoes that Jessica was actually a last-minute replacement then as well, so I don't believe it was supposed to be her originally. She was just filling in.
I believe Team Nerdist was a last-minute replacement as well, and Jessica was a replacement on top of the team being a replacement maybe for Bonnie and Katie. Well, the headline of this match, IGN is legit. I haven't seen a SmackDown like this in quite a while.
Absolutely. I described this match in one word, bloodbath. It was not even close at any point.
Do you recall what the last round 2 knockout was?
I believe it was Team Patriots versus the Mega Powers when they were still a team. That was an 18-3 beatdown. So that was the last one. Before that, we had the championship match between Top 10 and Schmoes that was also a knockout, but I believe that was round 3. Or round 4, actually. So they're still there. Still knockouts are there, but yeah, this one was way above the class. It just seemed like it was no mercy. Very good debut from IGN. Team Patriots has been put on notice for sure.
It's hard to find any takeaways for Nerdist, but I think it's super lame that they would be charged a repeat request on a steal. It wasn't their question. It was IGN's question. So I don't blame them for having to have the multiple choice answers repeated because it was IGN's question. So I don't think repeat requests should be charged in steal situations in round 2 multiple choices. What about you?
It should be reread to the opposing team automatically. I agree with you. There shouldn't be a repeat.
Nerdist spun Sandra Bullock, just like IGN did, strangely enough. And then they spun again and they got opponent's choice. And that was really the match right there. IGN then selected biopics, and even with some easy biopic questions, Nerdist could get nothing done. Well, in their post-interview, IGN set their sights on Team Patriots. The question, as always, how long will it take?
It's not going to be very long, I don't think. And Nerdist, just real quick, not living up to the name.
Yeah, the Mayor Dan Casey, we all thought he was going to be really good in this league when he first joined. We all had high expectations, but so far he has not lived up in his couple matches. Oddly enough, I used to confuse Dan Casey and Jason Inman all the time, but thanks to the Schmoedown, I do not confuse them anymore.
Similar hair, similar beard. I see what you're saying.
It has nothing to do with the fact that they're both nondescript Caucasian males.
Way to keep it PC.
Let's move to the Movie Trivia Schmoedown singles match for this week. Clarke Wolfe versus JTE. Now, my prediction before the match is as follows. This is something that I noted. I timestamped it. So let's just leave it at that. It's absolutely something I said before the match. I said Clarke will beat JTE since this match was planned around the time that Nightmares was put on the bubble. And I think this match was a way of making up for it in a way. Especially since Riley delayed his own path to the title for no apparent reason, despite risking his team partnership with Clarke in the process. I still believe Wolves of Steel will break up as a result of the Clarke-Riley matchup that results from Clarke beating JTE, and since Nightmares was moved to once a month earlier this week, Clarke losing to JTE in the same week as her show changing its status to once a month, that would be too cruel. So I said there was no way Clarke was losing to JTE. And sure enough, Clarke beat JTE. But let's start from the front. What did you think of Booker T's spot?
I'm glad that he got his intro music. I was glad to see Booker T. Big fan. The keys to victory, it just seemed a little general. I wish it would have been maybe some bullet points on screen that I could have got the optics of. I can't be too hard on Booker because it was his first time. So for now, I'm okay with the segment. I just think it needs a little bit of change with some bullet points, and we'll be fine.
Yeah, he told Clarke to focus. You could say that to every competitor to ever play this game. But ultimately, this was not about keys to victory. This was a way to cross-promote between both platforms. We want the Schmoedown audience to listen to Booker T's show. We want Booker T's audience to watch the Schmoedown. So this is a way of cross-promoting both platforms with the other, cross-pollinating, and Booker T kind of endorsing the Schmoedown is good for the Schmoedown because of all of the wrestling influence that is laced throughout the Schmoedown. So it's an endorsement in a way and a way to share audiences between the two platforms. So yeah, you'll get some keys to victory, but that's not the purpose of this.
Most importantly, Booker T could be the future mayor of Houston, Texas. So who knows, one day you could see the Movie Trivia Schmoedown in the Houston Texans Reliant Stadium. Sky's the limit.
Before the match, they did some pre-match trash talking as they always do. And there was something missing from JTE's pre-match smack talk that we'll get to later. I just want to point this out now. But then as they sat down after their intros, JTE made an interesting quote. He said, "Did you make the right decision?" He said that to Clarke, then pointed at his belt. So Clarke's decision allowed JTE to win the belt with Snyder. So JTE's smack talk, as frustrating and annoying as it can be, he can be very good at it. I'm going to compliment him again in the post-match about his smack talk.
Little Evil raising the bar, getting better each and every week. Him and Jeff Snyder both getting a little bit better on the mic each week. Must be learning some good lessons from Finstock.
Aaron, did you know what law school Ellie Woods went to?
I did not. I've admittedly never seen the film, so I did not know.
Excuse me, Elwoods. Pardon me.
Is it Elle? Is it Ellie? Who knows?
See, this is what we talked about last week. Everyone gives JTE and Natasha and Ashley and Wendy a hard time about their mispronunciations, but they don't hold themselves to a higher standard, and that's why the mispronunciation of the week is in existence.
And we'll have another one here at the end of the match.
Indeed we will. Well, in round 2, Clarke spun comedy only to spin again and land animation. I thought my prediction was in danger at this point, but she survived. And before we get to the outcome of round 2, I just want to say that we saw a shot of the audience, and they had added some tables with computers. Voitko was doing some stuff. I assume he may have been judging or keeping track of things. Adam Smith was there, the other engineer. So Kristian, again, is finally getting the help that I've been asking for the last 7 months. So they've got a full setup to prevent any mistakes from happening. You gotta love it. I was surprised that Clarke did not use multiple choice on that Spirited Away question, but she ended her round 2 turn with a score of 8-3, so not a huge round, but she didn't come away empty-handed. JTE, though, the wheel haunted him again as he spun opponent's choice. Clarke, of course, picked horror.
I was surprised that it landed on opponent's choice. I was more surprised that Clarke didn't know that they only had to spin that one time, and that was it. So that was kind of confusing. That kind of goes back to what we went through last week about the rules being said to people, about them seeing the rules as opposed to being read the rules. Once she got horror thriller, once JT got that, it was just a matter of time. Though he did get the John Landis answer, I was really surprised that he got that. Not that that it's not a well-known film, it is, but to know who wrote it, that's a little bit harder. So I was very impressed that JT got it, but once Clarke got going, it was over from there.
I think the turning point during JTE's turn was when Clarke stole that fly question. But going back to our discussion about reading and hearing the rules, They need to give everybody a crash course on the rules before each match, have them spin the wheel before each match. I'm not talking about a crash course video. I'm just talking about a quick download because for some reason, competitors are not retaining the rules when read to them. So let's get everybody on the same page. We've seen too many examples of seasoned veterans not knowing the rules as well as they should. Well, Aaron, there was a significant event before round 3 as we learned that 1-pointers are now 2-pointers. As the host of the Schmoedown Rundown, did you know about this?
This is one of the few instances since I've hosted the show where I had no idea. I was just as out of the loop as the entire audience when Ellis just casually said, we don't have 1-point questions anymore. Now we have a 2-point question. I was like, wait a second. That changes the dynamic of the game. Why was this not announced in maybe the top 10 recap special? Perhaps a little plug on Jedi Council, maybe movie talk. Where was this information?
They made a big thing about the new rules they introduced last week, like the Josh McCougar rules, so why didn't they do it this week?
Why wasn't I allowed to drop it on the show? Who knows?
I guess you're just not that official, Aaron.
It doesn't feel like it right now.
Your newfound association with me is costing you information.
Just know that the chairman gives me plenty of information, and I'm good with that.
Well, just know, back when I was his favorite, he used to give me information too. Now I have to go through back channels.
Can you just repeat the question again? I'm sorry.
We forgot to mention this during the team match recap, but I like that they did the ranking updates in the beginning of the team match with IGN and Nerdist. I don't like doing these separate videos for ranking specials because I want to know during the matches, before the matches, where these teams stand. I think it just makes more sense to go through a rankings update. Plus, they save themselves the production cost of making a standalone ranking special. They kill 2 birds with 1 stone. This means they can have a bit more fun at Star Wars Celebration.
Yeah, it looks a lot cleaner, too. Instead of having Cobster or somebody sit there and have to cut this video together with just little clips from the shows, you could just have a graphic, go through the top 10. It looks clean. It looks nice and neat. No need for extra production time. It's just there and done with. Probably saves them time and money. So I'm okay with it. I like it a lot better, too.
I thought JTE would win the match with that Corey Haim, Heather Graham question, license to drive. I thought that would be the difference, but Clarke answered right back with Viggo Mortensen in Hidalgo.
Amazing pull.
And once again, JTE, for his third question, his 5-pointer, he always gets the toughest questions. What was the home planet for the Green Lantern Corps? Oa, apparently. So Clarke wins. Clarke wins. And last week, when we discussed the introduction of the Josh McCougar rule, I said that at some point, JTE would start using his leftover repeat requests just to annoy everyone. And sure enough, JTE did exactly that. Even though he did not know the answer to his final question, the crowd basically threw tomatoes at him for doing this.
Are you sure it's Oa and not the OA?
I would never confuse Oa with Kristian's favorite show, the OA.
I'll have to double check that.
Did you know the answer, by the way?
Yeah, I did know the answer. Yes, I did.
Wow, really? Why? How?
I am a DC Comics fan, and I just recently read Blackest Night, the Jeff Johns story about the Green Lantern Corps. It's fantastic, and you do learn a lot about Oa, and the villain is Necron. It's pretty fantastic.
Do you need a paper towel?
Because I'm so sweaty?
Hey, you knew exactly where I was going with that.
I'll just turn up the AC. I'm good.
Anyways, moving to the post-interview. Riley took a shot at me as he stared into my soul. He said, we'll always be teammates in regards to Clarke. And this wasn't the only time Riley took shots at me. He really hurt my feelings this week. But I'm sticking with what I've been saying for weeks. Riley inexplicably stepped aside for Clarke to play JTE, delaying his own path to the title, making his own path even more difficult, and now putting strain on his team relationship. This ends with the Wolves of Steel breaking up.
I got in a discussion with one of the commenters last week on our video that said, why do you think that Clarke and Riley are going to break up? Why would they break up if they had one match together? And I simply stated, championships change friendships. And that's the truth. You want a championship, and if you really want to be a champion, nobody will get in your way, even your friends.
To that point, Magic Hat, once he beats Snyder, will soon be dangling a title shot in front of Riley's nose. Do you really think he's going to turn that down? I just saw those guys at my local yard house last week. So I'm already off the Merluga idea, as Dan just doesn't have the availability for team play, it seems. So Ryluga is a foregone conclusion to me at this time.
Is it a scenario where we see Makuga Riley as a team, and then we see Clarke Wolfe and Mark Bernardin as a team?
Yeah, that's another thing. I mean, Bernardin put that idea out there. We thought, oh, it was just a throwaway comment. He probably didn't know the league minutia, but it would be interesting to see Bernardin and Clarke team up. It would also be interesting to see if Clarke starts a stable with the likes of Stacy and Miss Movies and Perry.
Can you just repeat the question again? I'm sorry.
So there are options for Clarke, but the Wolves of Steel are not long for this world. Well, we got to mention that the champ John Rocha interrupted Clarke and Riley talking during their post-interview, and Clarke dished some shots at Rocha. She said that Dan lost more than Rocha won. She also said to Rocha, you'd think if you were a winner, you'd be more confident, not less confident. So Clarke is fired up. She's pissed off that Nightmares is now once a month, and she's unleashing her wrath on the Schmoedown.
I think that everybody has something in the tank for Rocha because they know that eventually, once they get towards that upper echelon, that Rocha is going to take the microphone from Emma Fyffe. As John Rocha said, he wants all the records, and he's definitely setting the record for most times stealing the microphone. So I'm sure that Clarke and most other competitors have something ready to go when John Rocha shows up.
And I'm sure Emma had no idea this was happening.
Absolutely not.
That was just a callback to last week's show. Well, moving to JTE's post-interview, he again blamed the wheel for his successes and failures. Emma said JTE should be flattered over the rule name. However, he knows it's really Josh Makuga's rule, but they couldn't call it the Josh Makuga rule because they couldn't give Brian Davids that much credit. Snyder then came on to join his partner. He trashed Makuga. Makuga then interrupted to talk some smack. And JTE, with some of the best smack talk of the night, said, "Where's Team TV Talk?" Those guys got in a big fight on the Schmoes Know Show about Team TV Talk since JTE mocked the team name, given that it's a movie trivia contest. Obviously, Makuga bailed on those plans, even though Griffin deserved a shot. However, he's got someone great up his sleeve, like Ryluga or Merluga. Plus, Kristian needs one of his top draws paired with another top draw. Sorry, Mrs. Griffin. So JTE wisely called out Makuga's change in plans. JTE was then asked about the Merle situation, only he said he addressed it during the pre-match. This is something I pointed out earlier. However, it wasn't addressed in the pre-game. The editor cut it out for some reason. He said, "We thought he was a lion. He was a liar. He lost. He's not a champion." That was JTE's response to Merle and not showing up for Merle's title defense.
If we're going by wins and losses, who's the real liar in the Lion's Den when it comes to JTE and Merle? Come on, man.
Well, regardless, great match between Clarke and JTE, even though I knew Clarke would win 3 weeks ago. Before we get to our next segment, I forgot to mention something during this week's behind the scenes and blooper show. Last week I said how my favorite part of the Doctor Strange commentary was Jeremy lurking in the background. So what did they have Jeremy do this week? Lurk in the background. So even though the number of allies that I have at that office decreases on a daily basis, at least they still trust my judgment on what works and what doesn't. All right, it's time for this week's mispronunciation of the week. And it was committed by John Campea during Movie Talk on Monday. However, his victim of this week's mispronunciation of the week guested in studio for an interview the next day with John Campea. I'm talking about Moana's Auli'i Cravalho. Auli'i Cravalho. Auli'i Cravalho. Auli'i Cravalho.
Auli'i Cravalho.
Very good, Aaron. Now, I was amused by this interview since they talked about Auli'i's Oscar performance, only we all know that John hates musical performances during the Oscars and wishes they were cut out of the show. Obviously, he didn't tell Auli'i this, but he did pull back a bit in his comments on Monday as he said he'd settle for a compilation medley of all the nominees.
But as much as he doesn't like music at the Oscars, he does love Moana, constantly rocking the Moana windbreaker every chance he gets.
Yeah, whenever the studio sends swag John's way, he loves to go straight for the windbreaker, but he's one of those guys who thinks it should have won for Best Animated Feature, so the wardrobe makes sense. And one more time, folks, the director of Logan is named James Mangold, not James Mangold, and the director of Netflix's The Irishman is named Martin Scorsese. Martin Scorsese.
Netflix doesn't give someone named Scorsese $125 million. They give it to Scorsese.
You tell him, Aaron. Well, those are your mispronunciations of the week. Before we get to our discussion of Schmoes Know Show number 272, please support this show by rating and reviewing the Schmoes Know podcast feed in iTunes, even if you don't use iTunes, especially you YouTubers. If you listen to the show via an Apple device, make sure to do the same by way of the podcast app. Also, we're on Twitter now, so give us a follow at After Schmoe, as some cool stuff will be given away very soon. All right, it's time for our discussion of Schmoes Know Show number 272, Logan preview, plus Jared Haben in studio. Who's our cast this week, Aaron?
We had Mark Ellis, Andres Cabrera, Ken Knapsack, and Wendy Lee.
Who's on our couch?
We had the wild man Josh McCouga and a very salty Mark Riley.
Yeah, I said it earlier. Riley was all riled up, for lack of a better word, but who are we missing?
We were missing Kristian Harloff. Once again, we were missing Mr. Wiggly Brett Sheridan.
I'm glad that Brett is continuing to take some me time in New Orleans. I've heard rumors similar to that of Howard Stern's sidekick, Robin Quivers, in certain activities she once performed in Peru. So I think we're going to get a whole new Brett upon his return.
Sounds delicious.
Now, did you realize that Ken no longer writes his intros for the show? I guess he did so in Phase 5, but now he just kind of wings it. Does this surprise you?
It surprised me that he doesn't write it because it's so well done, but then again, I guess I shouldn't be surprised because it's Ken, and he is just that good.
He is the improv master, so it's not a surprise that he's able to wing it and be that good. Now let's talk about the dumpster issue. Apparently they have a big trash problem. Wendy was very upset when she said people can't seem to open the lid. Is this upsetting as a fan that they cannot get their dumpster straight?
It's unacceptable. How do you not lift the dumpster lid, especially when it was described as a small dumpster? Does it have weights on top of it? Is there a spider issue? What's going on?
It's overflowing with empty bottles of John Campia's Citrus Siesta.
Well, in that case, I hope they're recycling there, and I hope that they're throwing the trash in the regular trash and putting the recyclables in the recycle bin.
They try to pass the blame like it was Panera paraphernalia, but don't let anybody tell you otherwise. It's John Campia's Citrus Siesta.
Paraphernalia? I feel like you can get arrested for that.
You can. You absolutely can. But let me ask you, Aaron, we kind of talked about this earlier, but what did you think of the new logos, the new graphics, the new branding overall?
I was a big fan of it. Well done by, once again, Cobster. Well done, sir. Cobster and team. Well done on the new graphics. I liked them all.
Yeah, Cobster was kind of the creative director. Ray Ora did the graphic design. He does most of Collider stuff. My only nitpick is that there is a logo on the far right where Schmoes Know is written in white, and it's very hard to read, so perhaps a bit of outlining could go a long way, but maybe it's intentional. Who knows? Now, Mark Ellis was very insecure about his appearance this episode. He said he looked like a pimple that was about to explode. He was commenting about his black shirt, his button-down shirt. McCouga said this was his only stand-up shirt from 2014 to 2016. And strangely enough, whenever I've watched Ellis do stand-up, he was wearing that black button-down shirt. And Ellis seemed aggravated by everyone commenting on his stand-up wardrobe. He said to Wendy, I'll kill the suspense for you. I was wearing that shirt whenever she saw him last. So, did you think Ellis was aggravated?
A little bit. I feel like, though, he had that Vincent Chase vibe going on, where he just has, like, one really nice shirt that he wears on occasion, and that's totally fine. I'm the same way. To throw out a movie reference, if you remember in the film Major League, when Charlie Sheen has to wear the suit, and he cuts the sleeves out of it, and he says, I feel like a banker in this, that's how I feel anytime I wear a shirt with buttons on the neck.
I love how you went from Entourage to Major League. That's a very big shift. Now, are you surprised that Josh McCouga doesn't like Disneyland?
That is surprising to me. What does he like? I know he doesn't like Halloween Horror Nights, or does he?
I like how you kept last week's thread alive, but it seems the wild man is jealous of Mr. Toad.
He doesn't like Cars Land. You mean to tell me he's not going to go to Star Wars Land whenever it opens?
I think he had his heart broken at Disneyland one time, and I think he's been afraid to go back ever since.
Get you every time.
Now, I noted in my notes Riley's Collider nightmares, and I think I did this because Riley was talking about his recent nightmares, and so I thought I would brand it with Collider because Collider Nightmares had big news this week. Riley was talking about his own nightmares, hence Riley's Collider Nightmares. Now, Aaron, have you had night terrors of any kind?
I've never had night terrors. I've never had sleep paralysis. It seems terrifying, and I'm glad that I've not had them.
I've had sleep paralysis a few times. Each time I get it, I think I'm going to be able to conquer it, and I never can. Some cultures think that a demon is sitting on you. Some think that ghosts are pushing you down. Some think that you're being abducted by aliens.
I don't even want to think about that. That sounds awful.
Do you know what Beardo's sound drop was that scared the crap out of Makuga?
I couldn't tell if it was from... It sounded like it might have been from Poltergeist, but I wasn't sure. But man, it was creepy.
It was, because it was so quiet, you thought it was part of the show for a minute. Like, it didn't sound like a sound drop. It was so subtle that it sounded for real. And for the guy that loves escape room experiences, Makuga instantly reminded us of the kind of guy that would not be into escape room experiences, because he flipped those damn headphones right off. Now, Makuga talked about his own night terrors. Maybe that plays a part in the fact that he's scared of a lot of horror-related stuff because he has night terrors or has had night terrors for a long time. But yeah, Makuga is just haunted for some reason.
Maybe it's Pittsburgh. Maybe it's actually Pittsburgh that's haunted, and he just comes from a haunted area.
The Steel City will steal your soul. Because Brett is still catching beads at Mardi Gras, we got another animations with Ace. I like that Ace continues to highlight properties that have live adaptations in the works, such as Adam Wingard's Death Note. If nobody cares about the anime, at least he can tempt them with a film or show first.
I was very high on last week's Ghost in the Shell because I wanted to know more about it. I wasn't fully aware of what Death Note was. I knew that Adam Wingard was doing something with it, and the way that he described it, I wasn't too into it, but I will seek out that information. It was okay for me.
For me,
this segment pertains to what I think is a small group of the audience, so I'm glad that they're getting their due, but for this week, this one wasn't quite for me.
For me, I still like my idea from last week where I said he should go back and forth between animation and indie picks. We need someone to fill the indie pick role now that SPR is no longer in the picture. So Ace has indie taste, hence Nocturnal Animals being his number one film of 2016. So I can't think of a better person to fill that void. Indies with Ace. Ace Indies. Ace's Indies. Indie Ace.
Oh, I like that one. Indie Ace. I like that
Indie
one.
Ace. Indie Ace. It's like NDA, only Indie Ace.
Sign this Indie Ace agreement.
There you go. See, you're doing it, Peter.
Yes.
Or Ace's Indie Taste. I was amused by the fact that Ellis tried to rush Ace off the stage because he just wanted his quick reaction to the 12 minutes of Ghost in the Shell footage. And Ace went into this big, long thing, and Ellis was just like, come on, man, I'm trying to get us to break. You're screwing with my perfect segue.
Ellis always with the good segues, and I still wanted to hear a little bit more about the Ghost in the Shell footage, as I am still interested.
Now, we heard during the show that they're going to move the behind-the-scenes content to the main channel, even though there's barely been any behind-the-scenes content lately. What do you think about this?
Very interesting that it's moving to the main channel. Why is it not on SK Plus, as it could be a flagship program? I'm confused.
I liked that the behind-the-scenes material was on the SK Plus channel because it gave our shows the chance to be found by new viewers who did not know we existed. So by giving them behind-the-scenes material on SK Plus, it brings new people over to find shows like the number 1 show, After Schmoe, the number 2 show, The Rundown, the number 3 show, The Wangers, etc., etc.
A rising tide raises all ships.
Now the news. We got the news back from Mr. Ken Knapsack. Any thoughts on this week's news?
Loved it. Loved that it started off segment 2. The news is back. Ken in full form. Even when Ken is tired and doesn't have the news ready to go, you know that the next week when he comes back with it, he's going to come back with a vengeance, and he absolutely did that this week.
I loved his Fleetwood Mac tribute based on the recent Guardians of the Galaxy trailer. I love that he paid his respects to our main man, Morgan Earp himself, Mr. Bill Paxton. Great to have Ken back. Well, Scott Mance was on the show. He was not our special guest of the week, but he was on the show. He handed out toy Oscars to everybody, little tiny Oscars. Is it possible that Emma Stone did invite him to the Oscars?
Well, he did say that when you're Scott Mance, you can do anything. So who knows? Who knows?
I realize it was likely a joke, and as a member of the movie media elite, he was likely given a press pass, but I wouldn't be surprised if that happened.
Wasn't he better friends with Damien Chazelle than he was Emma Stone?
Yeah, he talked about how Chazelle circled all of the interviews that they got to do with Scott Mance. So Mance feels like he's a part of the La La Land team.
The guy touted this movie ever since, November, he said? So yeah, I mean, he was right there with it. He was probably part of the reason that it got all these nominations, or I like to think so.
Yeah, he was their biggest champion by far. Man, what a whirlwind of emotions for him to be there, to be amongst the confused audience, and to witness that train wreck firsthand, my God. And I hate to call out friend of the show, Josh McCouga, but he made a joke about Ellis's virginity during this segment that just made me cringe.
Typical Wildman fashion. Poor JTE, now poor Ellis.
Poor Emma as well. The wild man is a wild card.
Gotta get better with that delivery.
I love that the false news drop is a thing now, JTE's famous quote, false news. Well, Mance then gave us an impassioned monologue about how the Oscar mistake led to an act of unity between two diverse groups of people on stage. And while it's a bummer Moonlight didn't get the moment to themselves, don't blame that on La La Land or their attempts to give Moonlight the moment they deserved.
I didn't have a problem with him saying what he said about coming together on stage and Moonlight not getting their moment. I did have a bit of an issue with him basically saying, and I'm paraphrasing here, this is not an exact quote, that Moonlight was a makeup call for Crash. That rubbed me the wrong way very badly, because to me, it said that Moonlight, though it was good, it was only good because they had to make up for a previous film that should not have won. And I did not like that at all.
While I really liked his monologue, I definitely did not agree with that point because Slumdog Millionaire and 12 Years a Slave have both won since Crash won.
I just didn't like that comment. Everything else that he said was on point. I agreed with it. But Moonlight won Best Picture because it was the best picture and nothing else. So I just want to make that point clear. But everything else, I was okay with.
Barry Jenkins said to Variety that the moment was a mess, but kind of gorgeous. So imagine how much worse it could have been, though. What if producers didn't catch the mistake in time? Or what if they decided to not do anything about it until the next day? So I like Mance's point that, yeah, it may not have been the moment they wanted, but don't diminish the beauty of the moment that did happen. La La Land didn't make the mistake, but they did their best to make up for the mistake of some dipshit accountant on Twitter. Well, I must admit, I muted all the Logan discussion. Even non-spoiler discussions tell you what to expect and when to expect it. Snelljob and I talked about this a lot, in fact. And when people say things like, you need to go out and see this right away, you don't want to be spoiled with this one, that tells me a lot right there. You actually learn a lot about movies from what people don't say.
It's funny that you muted it because I kind of wish that I had. This whole preview to me was pointless because of the people that were there that had seen the film. There was 3. It was Cobster, it was Mance that had seen it, and Wendy had seen it. So only 3 people had actually seen it. Everybody else hadn't. And it was just speculative talk. It's like, yeah, I heard it was really good, but don't tell me anything, no spoilers. So it was kind of pointless to even have a discussion about previewing the movie when nobody could really talk about a plot point because it would have spoiled the film. To be honest, from after Mance left, The entire show after that, I was not a fan of.
Because we live on these channels, I don't think we realize how much we're learning about these big films. So I'm steering clear of previews and reviews, even if they're non-spoiler, moving forward because it's so hard to be surprised these days. That's why the Arrivals, the Hell or High Waters were beloved by so many people in 2016 as we didn't spend 2 years breaking down every single marketing material.
It's hard to do as a fan of the channel because that's their job. They need to get to it first. They want to have the discussion first. They want to get in that to boost numbers and such of that nature. And sometimes it is difficult to be a fan because you want that genuine experience of seeing Logan without any kind of context. They don't want to spoil it, but they have to talk about it because this is what a lot of people want to hear about. Whether it's my opinion or your opinion, we are a small part of that, but there are people out there that don't care about spoilers and want to hear that discussion.
In the future, I don't think the show needs 30 minutes to preview something.
You're exactly right, and that's why I wasn't into it, because it just became a question of, have you seen the film? And like, no, I'm going to go see it tomorrow. So it's like, what? Why are we even talking about it then?
Well, moving to the next segment, I loved the first hour of the show, and like you said, I wasn't the biggest fan of the second hour. No offense to Jared. So they did a wheel trivia contest between Josh McCouga and Jared Haben based on television. What was the crown supposed to be, or what was the title supposed to be as a result of winning?
I can't tell you. It goes back to what I just said about the Logan segment. Who on the panel watches The Bachelor? McCouga and Beardo? And it's like, okay, well, that's 3 people out of the, 15 that are there that can get in on this discussion. I don't understand why that was there. I know they had the guest Jared there and they wanted to talk about his Bachelor stuff, but it was not for me at all.
To be fair, the Schmoes Know Show has given us some guests and some segments in the past that I thought would be total dead weight, but they ended up being entertaining as hell. I mean, we just saw a contortionist on the show that blew us all away. Yeah, she's been in some movies, but that was the least interesting part of her interviews. So I always want to keep an open mind, but I think this segment would have benefited from Kristian's presence since he worked for The Bachelor or The Bachelorette at one point. He'd know what to ask a current contestant. I was amused by the fact, though, that Jared plugged television combat more than his actual show.
I noticed that as well.
But ultimately, I'm okay with guests like Jared because, for the most part, these surprise interviews can often be pretty good. And more importantly, they bring a new audience to these channels and to the Schmoedown. So I see why Kristian would take a gamble on this. In fact, I saw more female commenters this episode than I have in a while, so you can chalk that up to Jared. But my God, how funny was that caller who didn't want to pick Jared as he called him out for always losing on The Bachelorette. And that's when Jared chimed in how he recently won television combat. And even though I want to make fun of Beardo and McCouga for watching these shows, I think we've all been roped into watching reality shows like this by way of our significant others. I used to watch Project Runway, for God's sake. My most recent girlfriend loved all of that depressing A&E stuff, such as Intervention and all the most gruesome true crime stories. So when you're in a relationship, sometimes the juice is worth the squeeze. What about you? Have you been roped into such reality dregs?
Girl Next Door reference. I like it. Luckily, I've avoided that landmine with my wife. She doesn't care much for reality TV in that sense, but we do enjoy watching RuPaul's Drag Race together. So,
but did she twist your arm to watch it at first?
Originally, she did kind of, I wouldn't say force, but she suggested that I watch it with her.
Oh, she forced you to admit it.
I will never admit it. It has become a nice bonding experience for us, and I have no problem whatsoever saying that I am a gigantic fan of RuPaul's Drag Race. If you don't watch it, it's hilarious. It gave me more culture, so I thank her for that. Would The Bachelor have done the same thing? Probably not, so I'm glad that I avoided that landmine.
I recently said on this show that they need to find a permanent spot for the wheel during wheel games on the Schmoes Know Show, and they went ahead and did that, only they revealed it too soon, prompting Riley to fire shots at everybody. But I gotta say, I do miss seeing that wheel every now and again.
I kind of wish they would just throw the old wheel away.
Did you eat cold lasagna before the show? Because I thought I was the bad cop.
Because it just looks dirty and grimy. I don't like it.
You just gave me an idea for an SK Plus video.
What's that?
If they ever decide to fully retire this wheel, they should have Clarke Wolfe go Office Space on it. She'd beat it up with a baseball bat, she'd light it on fire, she'd drive over it with her car, she'd spit on its ashes. That way she finally purges herself of all the negativity that wheel has caused her.
Are you listening to this, guys? Pay this man. That is amazing.
Well, since we don't have behind the scenes on our channel anymore, I'm just trying to make up for it.
Sounds awesome.
Now, did I hear this correctly? Did Cobster say that he's never seen Seinfeld?
I completely missed that, but that's very odd.
I could have sworn I heard him say it as other people were talking, but then I was amazed by the fact that Makuga was drinking Chardonnay on this episode. Magic Hat himself.
That's what they said, but I don't know if it was or not. And dude, you can't keep your eyes close to the microphone. Come on, this is day one stuff.
But it's upsetting because Magic Hat pays Josh Makuga a lot of money to endorse their product, and I don't like the idea that he's drinking Chardonnay on the Schmoes Know Show.
Maybe they've had a falling out that we just haven't heard about. Maybe Magic Hat put their endorsement behind the Magic Man, Mark Bernardin.
Maybe Magic Hat only wants to be associated with bachelors. Now that he's got a fiance, maybe they cut their ties with him.
There it is.
And by far, one of my favorite laughs of the episode was when Jared was expressing how surprised he was by the fact that ESPN just so happens to have a fantasy bachelor league without taking into account the common thread between ESPN and ABC.
Was he also not aware that there's like a fantasy league for every television show? There's a Walking Dead one as well?
Well, of course there is. I'm just making the point that there shouldn't be any surprise that two Disney properties would cross-pollinate.
Well, I would speak more to that, but I'm actually under NDA from the Disney company as to not to speak to any of their business affairs.
Actually, you're under an indie ace.
Ah, indie ace. Very nice.
That's what the French would call a callback.
Very nicely done.
But yeah, folks, let's get a movement going for Indie Ace to do indie picks.
Hashtag it.
And my final laugh of the night, I don't know why this killed me, but I was rolling on the floor when Wendy started her plug and stopped to say, "Which one's my camera?" and then pointed to it. I could not control myself.
Wendy was much more active on this episode than she had been her previous, I'd noticed. She spoke up a lot more, she got into more discussions. Always good to see that from Wendy. Keep these women in rotation. Get Miss Movies back on there. Let's keep seeing this.
I wonder if Wendy is into escape rooms.
Good point. Who knows? Maybe they should have a movie couple channel, Team Escape Room.
I just thought of another SK Plus video idea. Wendy, Miss Movies, Joelle, Perry, Emma, all do an escape room experience. Makuga hosts it, Robert records it, and voila.
There you go.
Well, Aaron, let's get out of here. Where can people find more of you and your work on the number 2 show on the SK Plus channel?
You can find me on that show every Saturday hosting the Schmoedown Rundown. This past week we had JTE on. This week, Emma Fife. So check us out there every Saturday on the SK Plus channel.
And you guys can follow me, Brian Davids, on Twitter at BDF331. Make sure to follow After Schmoe on Twitter and use the hashtag After Schmoe for any questions, as they just might end up on this show someday. And yes, we'll be giving away some great stuff, so at After Schmoe is a must follow. Remember to rate and review the Schmoes Know podcast feed in iTunes, as well as through the podcast app on your Apple devices. And I'd like to thank Kristian Harloff, Robert Butler III, Cody Hall, and Christian Ruvalcaba. Well, until next week, I'm Brian Davids.
And I'm Aaron Turner.
And you're welcome for the ratings.